Hello, hello, hello. This is test one. Welcome to the stream. It is a late stream, but it's going to be a short stream tonight. I'm going to be talking about some Dungeons & Dragons rules and some interpretation of the rules that I have in my games that you might not have thought about. So we're going to be talking about armor class tonight, and it's pretty much one of the most essential and basic rules of Dungeons & Dragons. But, you know, as much as I tell people all about armor class, sometimes it's still a mystery as to how you arrive at armor class, and especially for new players, this is going to be a great video for them to sort of get some basic info on it and also some sort of advanced opinions on it as well. So let's start off by talking about armor class. So in Dungeons & Dragons, your armor class basically is another way of saying how hard it is for your character to get hurt. Not how much punishment you can take. That is something else called hit points. But armor class is specifically a statistic in the game that will determine whether or not you have been hurt by a particular attack or any kind of an offensive action directed towards you. So in D&D 5th edition, everybody, regardless of class, race, has an armor class of 10. That is your default armor class. If you create a character and decide to go on your journey without wearing any armor, just your shirt and pants, you have a 10 armor class. Now, armor class is essentially the number that needs to be rolled higher than your armor class to be rolled in order to actually inflict damage on your character. You're going to see why I word it that way. When I was a younger player, Dungeon Master, I always said, in order to get hit, you need to roll higher than the armor class. And you're going to see here why in a bit. I'm rephrasing that for all my new players so that they understand that it's not whether or not you get hit, it's whether or not you get hurt. So every character starts with a 10 armor class. Depending on the armor that you decide to go and purchase or equip yourself with as a new adventure, that starting armor class could change. So let's just look at examples. A suit of leather armor starts a player off with an 11 armor class instead of 10, so it affords them a little bit more protection. In fact, in the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, there's a list of all the armors that you can purchase in the game that you can equip with, and it's going to outline your basic starting armor class. This actually replaces your basic armor class that you would have with no armor, so you don't add it to the 10, you just replace your armor class with it. So like I said, light armors typically range from 11 to 12. You have leather armor, studded leather armor, padded armor, 11 to 12 depending on the suit. Studded leather, I believe, is 12. Medium armors range anywhere from 12 to 15 when you are calculating your starting armor class. And heavy armors go all the way up to 18. So depending on the type of armor that your class is able to wear, it's going to dictate your starting armor class. Now your armor class is modified either a negative aspect or a positive aspect depending on your dexterity. So if you are a clumsy fellow, you're not very agile and you're not very fast, meaning you have a low dexterity score, you're going to get a penalty to your armor class to start with. And that reflects your innate inability to dodge attacks or stay nimble enough to dodge attacks or to avoid getting hurt. So you take your armor class, you take your base armor class, and you add in your dexterity bonus. So give an example. Let's say we have John the Thief or John the Rogue, and he has a +3 to his dexterity bonus because of his nimbleness and dexterity. He would add that +3 to his 10, and he would have a 13 armor class. Further to that point, if John decided to wear a suit of leather armor instead of just his shirt and pants when he went out adventuring, he'd start with an 11, add the 3, and would have a 14 armor class. So dexterity plays an important role when determining your armor class. Now, the big thing that I want to stress to players and dungeon masters alike is that your armor class is not whether you physically get struck by an attack. So let's keep on the example with John. Let's say John is wearing his suit of leather armor, and he is quite nimble at +3 dexterity bonus, so he has a 14 armor class. Let's say we have a goblin who's attacking John with a sword. And that goblin comes charging at him and swings, and the dungeon master rolls a 10 to hit John. The verbiage that is used in this situation would not be that the goblin misses, although it is tempting to just flat out say, hey, you rolled and you missed. But to look at the actual armor class and go, well, wait a minute here, a 10 could be a hit, but he's wearing leather armor, and that leather armor has an innate armor class of 11. So maybe the goblin hit the armor, but the armor protected John the rogue. So it's okay to say that that sword, or that goblin's sword, actually struck the player. But because of his leather armor, having an armor class of 11, it protected him from said attack. Let's go a step further, and let's say that the Dungeon Master rolled a 12. Okay, still not enough to beat the armor class of John the Rogue, but it definitely was big enough, or a high enough roll to beat the armor's rating, leather armor being 11. So we're in a situation where it didn't actually top the armor class, didn't exceed the armor class, but definitely was more than leather armor could protect him from. So in that situation, if I was the Dungeon Master, I would explain to John and say, hey, you know what? You managed to dodge that attack. Because yes, your armor class is 13. It did not get past your defenses, but more than likely that that would have cut through your armor if not for your dexterity bonus. So there's different ways to frame sort of how these attacks are taking place. Let me spin an opposite example. Let's say we have Roland the Knight. Okay, and Roland is wearing a suit of heavy plate armor. Okay, and that plate armor gives him an armor class of 18. Let's take it a step further and give Roland a shield. He's now got a 20 armor class. For all intents and purposes, Roland is not getting hurt. You notice I said hurt. Roland's definitely going to get hit, but he's not going to get hurt. So with a 20 armor class, let's say said goblin steps up and decides to swing his sword, and he rolls a 15. Now, the old school Dwayne would have said, oh, he misses. But is it really fair to say that the goblin who rolled a 15 on his attack roll actually missed Roland, like completely swung and got air? Probably not, but it definitely didn't get past Roland's armor class. So in this situation, I would describe the attack to the player and say, this goblin swings his sword and smashes it right across your head. You can hear the clanging noise, and you know you're going to have a headache for a week after that hit. But your armor holds. You see how it is different? The actual contact of it is made, but because it didn't penetrate the armor class or didn't roll better than the armor class, it doesn't actually hurt Roland. So let's take it a step further and say that Roland's getting attacked by a goblin archer. Archer standing 30 feet away and lets fly an arrow at Roland. Okay, and he rolls an 18. Now again, do you think the Dungeon Master should describe that arrow as completely missing? I would say no. I would say that an 18 is a pretty darn good roll. In fact, on any given day, an 18 is going to hit whoever gets shot at. But having said that, it's definitely not going to hurt Roland. Roland's got a 20 armor class, so it definitely didn't beat his defenses. So the description of that can change. It can now become, hey, Roland, you just got shot at by an archer, and the arrow ricochets off your chest plate or your shield, or it thuds into your shield. Again, taking the hit physically, but not penetrating his defenses. Used to be back in the day that those kind of hits, if they didn't penetrate the armor class, would just be flat out misses. I mean, quite honestly, all the characters in my games were Neo from the Matrix. If I didn't penetrate the armor class, it was considered a miss. So we have all these knights and rogues and rangers sort of bending back in bullet time as everything was completely missing them. So I think it's worthwhile to look at how armor class is built in a character and factor that into the descriptions of how you actually are describing hits and combat with your players. Now, one more thing about armor class. In the light category, players do get that dexterity bonus like we talked about. But as they move up, getting into medium and heavy armors, that dexterity bonus actually starts to go away, or actually starts to get minimized and then entirely going away when you're dealing with heavy armors. So anything in the medium category, when you start looking at the chart, you're going to see that they cap out their dexterity modifiers at +2. So if you are a really nimble rogue, let's say you have a +4 dexterity bonus, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you going to start wearing heavy armor versus the trade-off as far as some of the penalties and such that comes along with it, versus just sticking with your lighter armor because you're a lot more nimble. Further, when you get into heavy armor, you don't get any dexterity bonus. So regardless, I mean, if John the Thief decided to put on plate armor, he's going to get an 18 armor class for sure, but he's not going to get his +4 dexterity bonus. But further to that, his stealth rolls are at disadvantage, and he needs a minimum of 15 strength to even put that suit on and walk around with it. So when decking your character out with armor, it's good to have a look at that table, kind of weigh the pros and cons of what armor is going to do for your character, and try and decide what armor you're going to wear that's going to fit with the build that you have. Protection is great, but if it comes at a cost and it doesn't really fit within the theme of your character, it's probably not going to be worthwhile to do it. So that's the basics on armor class. I hope you kind of followed me there. In actual fact, I hope I didn't fumble through it too badly. But that's just some of the things I've learned, playing D&D. Another thing to consider as a dungeon master is wear and tear on armor is a thing. You got to think that that eventually that suit of plate armor is going to get dinged up, or heaven forbid the shield get broken. And sometimes I reserve those kinds of things for usually like critical failure or critical hits. Sorry. I had one situation where a hill giant literally smashed his giant club down on a player who had a shield and had some heavy armor, but he rolled a natural 20. So my basically flavor or fluff description of that was that his shield got shattered. The hero was protected because of his high armor class, mind you, but he did get a broken shield out of it. So just feel free to throw in some of that flavor, whether that be leather armor straps getting cut, the armor itself getting so whittled down over the course of many adventures that they need to replace it. Build some of that wear and tear into your D&D world so that players realize that swords can be broken and worn out and dulled, as well as armor actually becoming damaged over time. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Like I said, it was a really short stream. I just had to get it out of my system. I've been wanting to talk about it for a while. Make sure you follow our channel. We've got lots of cool stuff coming up. Our Dungeons & Dragons campaign that's going to be launching in March. Bi-weekly, we've got 6 great players who are learning how to play D&D with me at the helm, as well as I usually stream video games, as well as some Dungeons & Dragons tips and such content like that. So thanks for tuning in. Sorry it was so short tonight, but we'll make it up to you in the future. Take care.